Hey guys, welcome back to the Bass Tutor. My name is Tyler Fry, and I'm the Bass Tutor. So if this is your first time stopping by, I really appreciate you for watching today's video, and I hope you like what I'm doing here and all the tips and tricks that I give out. And if you do, make sure to like and subscribe for a ton more content just like this, and tons of fishing videos, and just anything fishing related. So with that being said, today's video, I'm going to break down frog fishing. And this is going to be a video from everybody from beginner to advanced and everyone in between. And I'm pretty sure that if you watch this all the way through, that I've got a little bit of something that everybody can learn about frog fishing. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into a few things that I like to do to make my frog fishing excel above someone else's. And so the first modification that I like to do to a frog is I like to take the hooks on my frog and I like to bend them up. So the reason you might want to do this is if you're missing a lot of frog fish, if you're out fishing a frog right out of the package and you notice that there's a ton of fish coming up and they're pulling that frog under and you're setting the hook and you're missing them a lot, something that may happen is they may not be pushing this frog down enough to be able to get this hook. And a lot of the times, if you'll take a pair of pliers, just a regular old pair of needle nose pliers, and you'll grab this hook and you'll just bend it up a little bit, and then you'll come over here and you just bend it out just a hair, you're going to get a lot more hookups on this frog. And the reason for that is this frog, whenever it comes out of the package, you can see this one is super close to that body. You can see this hook is just right up against it almost. And that's a really good thing. It's going to keep this frog really weedless, and if you're casting it out there and it accidentally turns over on its head, then you're not going to get hung up in the weeds as bad. But if you're missing a ton of frog fish, then you might want to bend this hook up and bend it out a little bit, and you're going to get a lot better hookup ratio on this frog. And everybody that fishes a frog knows that the hookup ratio can be a major problem sometimes. So that little tip right there may save you a few fish and could help you win a little bit of money. And so another thing that I like to do with the frog is I like to add a little weight to my frogs, especially the frogs that I'm planning to fish a lot of thick and matted vegetation with. And so what I like to do is I will come back here to where this little hole is where the hook comes out. And I'll take this frog and I'll bend it out. And you'll see that's a pretty wide little hole right there. And what I'll do is I'll take either a 1/8 ounce or 1/16 ounce little lead weight, just like a little Texas rig weight, a little bullet weight, and I'll stick it down in there. And you can hear this frog right here has some in it. And that's what I've done is I've put 2 sinkers down in this frog to make it heavier. And the reason for that is this is going to allow that frog to sit deeper in that thick matted vegetation. It's going to sit a lot lower, it's going to make a bigger impression, and that's going to help you get the attention of a lot more fish as you're working that frog. And so what'll happen a lot of the time is that fish will see that frog coming from a long way. It'll see it make that impression, and then you'll get right over top of it and it'll either A, hit it right there, or it'll wait until it gets to a little hole down the stretch a little bit. It'll follow it to where there's a hole, you'll come in it and it'll come up and bust on it. And so the reason I like to do that is it just gives that fish more to key in on if they're eating it in that grass. And a key instance of this I'll show you in a video right here of where I was fishing a few weeks ago at our pond. And you can actually see it in a week or so's video ago. And I was frog fishing and I caught the biggest fish in our pond, and I caught it on a frog. And I've followed this fish for years. I've watched its progress. I've caught it probably 5 or 6 times, and it's really interesting to see it. And you can see in this video that she was sitting under this thick matted vegetation, the thickest stuff possible. And I had fired a Cinco out in front of her I don't know how many times, but she hadn't come out of that grass and hit it. But whenever I worked that frog over top of her, something about it, she just couldn't stand it. And it was this frog right here, this little booyah popping pad crasher, that was coming over top of her. And I'm pretty sure that she just couldn't stand that reaction. The predator in her just couldn't handle that reaction bite. And as soon as it went over top of her, she just inhaled it. So, with that being said, let's go into our next point of the video, and that's a walking frog. So what are some modifications that I like to do with this walking frog? Well, if I'm going to fish it over the matted grass, I may add a sinker or 2 to it to help it get a little bit more of an indentation. But I'm only going to add probably one to this frog just to keep it kind of lightweight so it's not difficult to walk this frog. And then I'll also bend the hooks out a little bit. You can see that frog right there. It's got the hook bent out just a little bit past where this hook point is sitting just about flush with where the body begins, but it's not too close in like it may have come in the package. And then you can also see that there's a little gap right there, and that's to allow me to get a better hookup ratio. And so what's one of the number one things that people starting off throwing a frog struggle with? And that's walking a frog. So I've got a few little tips to help you do that. The number one thing that I can tell you to do is to tie a loop knot. Now I've got a video that I'm going to link down below of how to tie a loop knot. It's a super easy knot, and it's really effective. And it's going to allow you to walk this frog. And if you don't know what walking a frog is, essentially what you're doing is you're swinging the back end of this frog around as you pop your line. You leave slack in your rod or in your line, and with your rod you pop the slack, and it twitches the frog from left to right. And you know, it's not just with a frog. You can do this with a spook or a ton of different other lures, topwaters especially. And it just puts off a different look to your lure, and it gets a lot of bites. And so another recommendation that I have for you is it's all about how you trim your legs of your frog. So one of the first things you want to do when you get a frog, or what I like to do, is I like to trim these legs. These legs, when they come out of the package, they're probably like to right here. I would say they're super long. And like on this popping frog, I like to trim them very short. But this walking bait, I'm going to leave them a little bit longer. But what I'm going to do is you'll see that this leg of this frog is a little bit longer than this one. And there's a reason for that. I like to always trim one leg shorter like this. I'll just take a pair of scissors and I'll trim it just a little bit shorter than the other leg. And what that does is that gives a lot less resistance to one side of the frog. So what happens is when you're popping that slack, one side is going to want to turn a lot quicker than the other side. Versus if you had both legs the same size, it's going to be a little bit harder to get that frog to twitch right. So if one leg is shorter, this frog is going to want to walk a lot better because one side, this side, has a lot less resistance than this leg. So that's just a quick little tip that's going to help you out, and it's going to allow you to get a lot more bites as you're able to walk that frog a lot better, especially starting out. So when you're throwing a frog, the color of your frog is super important. And you know, I like to keep my frog colors extremely easy. And you know, a lot of people, they like to throw a lot of different crazy colors, but I keep it very simple. So if it's a dark day, it's a real overcast day, or I'm fishing in some really dark water, I'm going to go to a black frog. A black frog is super hard to beat. It's natural. It puts off a good presentation and a good shadow, and those fish, they can key in on it really well. But if it's a really sunny day, I like to go to a pure white frog. I like to throw a frog that's going to put off a really good glow. It's going to put off a really bright presentation, and those fish are going to see a big glow above them, and they're going to go up and hit it. Or if I'm fishing a partly cloudy day or really clear water, that's when I like to throw something more natural, like maybe this natural looking color right here, or I might throw a brown, or I might throw a green or something like that. And the reason I do something like that is you're not always mimicking a frog. A really key thing that I like to focus on when I'm throwing a frog is I could be mimicking a bluegill, I could be mimicking bait fish, or it could be a frog or a snake, or even a small rodent like a rat or a baby beaver or anything like that. Or I could even be mimicking something like another fish or a bird. And so, you know, just because you're throwing a frog, just because it looks like a frog and that's what the company made it look like, that's not necessarily always what the fish think it is. And so another thing that I really like to focus on, and that I get asked quite frequently, is do you ever throw a frog on a lake that doesn't have grass? And yes, you can throw a frog on lakes that don't have grass. A lot of the times we like to focus on grass lakes because it's a frog, and we like to throw it around that thick cover. But do not be afraid to go out to a lake that's got a lot of wood in it, or a lot of laydowns or docks and stuff, and throw that frog around it, regardless of whether there's grass or not. And I'm hoping very soon, either this year or next year, to be able to make a video about me fishing a frog on a lake that's got no grass, so you'll believe that you can catch them. Because I have caught them on lakes that don't have a lot of grass or no grass. And so just whenever you're throwing this frog, keep in mind that it's not always mimicking a frog. It could be mimicking anything. And especially around time for the bluegill spawn, I like to throw a bluegill color regardless of what lake I'm on. And that's going to allow you to get a lot of those bass that are watching those bluegill spawn. And a lot of the times they'll think those bluegill are fleeing and they'll grab that frog, and that's game over for them. And so, with that being said, you're not going to be able to throw this frog if you don't know what to throw it around. And so, some of my favorite things to throw it around, if you're not fishing grass lakes, I like to throw it around docks, like at marinas. I like to throw it around trees that are in the water, whether they be laydowns, whether they be brush piles, whatever the case may be. I like to throw it over submerged brush piles. Maybe your brush pile's in 5 foot of water and you know there's fish suspended around it, or they're on that brush pile. Throw that frog over top of them and you'll get a lot of bites doing that. There's a ton of different things, big rock piles. I've seen people catch a fish off a lot of weird things with the frog, because all it's doing is mimicking any other type of bait fish or whatever the case may be. And another great way to throw this frog is it's a really kind of a finesse topwater. It doesn't make a ton of sound, it doesn't put off a ton of vibration, but the fish can see it coming from a long way. And so if your fish are kind of finicky and they're really, really pressured, throw that frog. If you're a co-angler in like a BFL or something and the guy in the front of the boat is throwing something really obnoxious like a spook or something, try throwing that frog behind him. He may look at you like you're crazy, but he's not going to look at you as if you're crazy if you're catching fish. So, those are just a few little instances. Now, obviously, if you're fishing around grass, you can throw it around cattails, you can throw it around reeds, lily pads, you can throw it around any type of grass in your lake. And I like to find the healthiest grass possible, especially in this fall time of year as the grass is beginning to die. Find that healthy grass, and those fish, they'll typically be pushed up in it if you catch them at the right time. And so, what are you going to throw your frog on? Well, my go-to setup is a 7/4 heavy rod with a fast action tip on it. It's got a lot of backbone, but it's got that fast tip to drive that hook, and it just does a super phenomenal job. This one is actually a St. Croix Avid X. It's it's a really good rod for frog fishing. I like throwing it a lot. Another really key aspect to your fishing is your reel. I want to throw the fastest reel gear ratio that I possibly can. This one right here is a Lews LFS. It's a 7.5-to-1. It's a super fast reel. But I like to throw the fastest reel I can get away with, whether it be an 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever the gear ratio may be. The faster, the better. Because whenever a fish bites this frog, I want to be able to catch up to the slack and be able to drive that hook as fast as I possibly can. And so that brings me to another point. When should you set the hook on a frog? So setting the hook on a frog can be a super, super challenging thing for a lot of people. A lot of people either will jerk it too fast. As soon as they see the water boil up or the fish blow up on it, they want to drive that hook. And as soon as they do, what happens next? Your frog just goes flying out of the distance. Then you also get the people that wait too late. The frog goes underwater, they don't see it for a while, the fish lets go of it, then they jerk. Next thing you know, it's flying again. And so you want to find that happy medium. And typically what I'm going to do whenever I'm frog fishing, a lot of people actually don't like watching their frog, but I like to watch my frog just because I want to see when it goes under. So you kind of got to find what works for you. A lot of people just wait until they feel pressure, but it's up to you. As for me, I like to watch my frog. Typically it's just jumping around, and the next thing you know, it disappears. Once it disappears, I reel down real quick, and if I feel even the slightest bit of pressure, I drive the hook. And typically if it stays underwater for more than 2 seconds, that fish has got it. Drive the hook as quick as possible. You're throwing your really heavy line, okay? I don't like to throw a frog on any less than 30-pound braid. And so I'll throw 30-pound braid if I'm fishing open water, like we were talking about earlier, on a lake that has like no grass whatsoever. If I'm throwing around docks and trees and stuff like that, I'll throw it on 30-pound. But if I'm fishing around any type of thick grass, I'm going to throw 50 to 65-pound braid. because I really want to be able to rip that fish out of that grass. I don't want to get whooped by that fish, and I don't want it to get down there and get wrapped up in a bunch of stuff and maybe trying to pull that fish up out of there and my line snap. So just keep in mind, if you're going to be fishing around some thick, heavy, matted grass, stick to 50-pound braid. But if you're fishing a lot of open water, try the 30-pound braid, because it's going to allow you to cast better, cast farther, and it's going to allow you to get into a lot more easier to reach or harder to reach places, because you're able to get a little bit better cast. So another key thing that I like to do whenever I'm fishing a frog is I like to make sure that this drag is cinched all the way down. I want the drag to be super tight. That way I don't have any slip whenever I'm setting the hook on a frog fish. You're fishing really heavy line, a really fast reel, and a really thick rod. And so I like to keep that drag cinched all the way down so I'm able to fight that fish through the cover all the way out. And so if you paid attention in the video earlier, I'll show you right now again. Whenever I first drove the hook on that fish, I actually hadn't paid attention to what my drag was set up. And whenever I set the hook, the fish was whipping me the first few seconds of the fight because my drag wasn't set up, cinched all the way down. And whenever I cinched the drag, then I was able to fight the fish the rest of the way.
Yes, sir.
And so, you know, a lot of people, they'll say, well, leave a little slack in your drag. That way when you set the hook, you know, you're not going to pull the frog away from or whatever the case is. When I'm fishing a frog, though, I like to leave that thing cinched all the way down. It's a power fishing lure. I just want to be able to get the fish away from the cover as quick as possible and fight it all the way through. And so the next thing I want to talk about is whether to throw a popping frog or throw a walking frog. So if you're not familiar with a frog, you can see that this one right here is known as a popping frog because it looks like a popper or a Rico or whatever type of popping style lure. It's got this little cup in it that allows this bait to spit water as it's chugging through there. Versus this one, which is a walking bait or a walking frog, and it's got a really pointed nose to it. And so that allows this frog to walk a lot better. So when are you going to throw one versus the other? Well, I like to throw the popping frog on windy days and days that there's a little bit of chop on the water. I feel like I can create a lot better commotion on top of the water as this thing's spitting and it's making a lot of ruckus. And if you've got those weights in there, then you can hear this thing coming from quite a ways away. And I also like to throw the popping frog whenever I'm fishing really thick grass like we talked about. With these weights in it, I want to be able to get this thing deep in there. I want the nose to be able to sink down in there and be able to make a lot of commotion as it's coming over the top of that grass. Now, if it's a slick, calm day or there's just a tiny bit of chop on the water, I want to throw this walking frog. It's kind of the opposite of what you would do with another topwater. So like on a windy day, you would throw a spook versus a calm day, you would throw a popper. It's kind of the opposite with a frog, in my opinion, because you want to throw the walking frog on the days when it's real slick, calm out. And, you know, this is a really finesse type of topwater. And, you know, they're able to see it coming from a long way, and all they do is they just come up and react to it. So those two really key factors play whenever I'm trying to decide which type of frog I want to throw for a specific day. And so that breaks down just about everything there is to know about frog fishing. We've talked about colors, we've talked about rods and reels, we've talked about a few little modifications you can make. We've talked about what the fish mimics, or what the frog mimics as the fish see it. So guys, I hope you're able to get out there really soon and catch a lot of fish on this frog. They're a super, super great lure to use, and in this fall time of the year, they can really produce some really big bites. Just keep in mind to work the thing, just keep working it, and work it over some of the thickest cover you can find. And that's typically where those big bass are going to hang out. And always remember to get the lure in the places that nobody else is going to. Don't be afraid to lose it. You may lose a few frogs, but if you do, it may be worth it if you pull out a giant. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to leave me a like and a comment, and let me know what you thought about it, and let me know what the biggest fish you've ever caught on a frog is. And so guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video and you're able to get out there and wet a line. We'll see you guys later.